Welcome to From Here to Eternity, a Gateway Seminary podcast about the nations. My name is Phil. I'm the host. I'm a professor here at Gateway Seminary, and I've been here for a little while. Lived overseas until recently for about 20 years. In this podcast, we address topics related to the cross-cultural spread of the gospel from here in California, across the U.S., and throughout the world. Today, we have Jesse Harris. He is a missionary to Spain. He received a PhD from Gateway just recently in Old Testament, and now he's overseas as a missionary to Spain with the International Mission Board. Jesse, hey, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you taking this time, especially with all your busy schedule right now.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Glad to join you.
Great. Let me just dive in with some of the questions that we have. Can you first just tell me who you are, how you came to faith in Christ? Can you just share your testimony?
Well, I'm Jesse, and I am serving with the IMB in Spain, in the capital city here, doing church planting, which means doing a lot of evangelism, discipleship, and will eventually, once I can get good enough at Spanish, be helping with leadership development through a seminary here. So I came to faith at about 24 years old. I grew up around the church as a young kid, but then we stopped going to church when I was younger. And by my teens and 20s, I was atheist, really maybe at best agnostic. But I definitely thought Christianity was the most foolish of all the religions. I liked science and philosophy. And so I thought they had disproven the Bible and Christianity. And after some years in the military, I was in college actually studying for molecular biology. And that's when God got a hold of me. I got in some trouble, and basically my life was kind of in a weird transition phase, and I started looking for meaning and purpose. And by God's grace, he ended up leading me to just open up a Bible and start reading it. Even though I was kind of exploring all the religions, eventually I got to Romans 10:9, where it says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. And I put my faith in Jesus, and it was a real radical transformation for me. And so not long after, I started looking for a church and found a good local church, and also was in college. So found a good college ministry and got super involved. And that's where I got introduced. That's where I got introduced to missions. I really love college ministry in general, just because it is so evangelistic typically and missional oriented. And so right away I was involved in missions, evangelism, all that kind of stuff. And so by the time I finished college, I really felt like God had called me not to do science and medical school, but instead to do ministry. So I stuck around and did college ministry and church planting for a few years, and then began my seminary journey, which ended up lasting a lot longer than I had initially expected it to.
So you originally were at Southeastern, because we went to the same church in Raleigh, but just at different times at Imago Dei. And then from Southeastern, you came to Gateway. Can you talk about that transition for a little bit?
Sure. Well, as I was finishing up my MDiv at Southeastern, which I really enjoyed my time at Southeastern, and of course, attending church at Imago Dei Church there in Raleigh, I felt called to missions, and I had for a long time. And so as I was finishing up, that was the plan. But through some interesting situations that occurred, basically God prompted me to start praying about more studies before heading overseas. And so prayed a lot about that and kind of juggled around a bunch of different topics to potentially study and places to study. But at the end of the day, after a lot of prayer, I just really felt called to study and teach the Bible. And I really wanted to do that with people who loved the Bible and believed in Jesus. And so I really liked Southeastern, but I also kind of wanted to, branch out to another school as well. And so I found Gateway, and the program that is at Gateway, especially the PhD program, is really an awesome program. really a sort of a diamond in the rough that a lot of people don't know about, but I think is really fantastic. And so people that love the Bible, that love Jesus, but are also pretty serious about their studies and thinking well about it. So yeah, chose to come out to California and do my studies, which was also kind of a cool opportunity to experience a different culture on the West Coast. I had always grown up and lived on the East Coast. Even though I'd spent some time in the military, I'd never really spent much time in the West Coast. So that was really a great opportunity and experience to learn some different cultures on the West Coast. Even though there's a lot of similarities across the U.S., there's a lot of differences too, as well in California.
Okay, you did your PhD in Old Testament. What was your topic and what was your thesis on?
Yeah, so I came to Gateway to study biblical studies, kind of generally, but to really focus ultimately on Old Testament. And I wrote my dissertation on Proverbs. The title is Finding the Knowledge of God on the Formative Role of Imitation in Proverbs 1 through 9. So it's kind of a mouthful, as it's supposed to be, right? But basically, the idea is that at the heart, at the core of that wisdom program, we might say, in chapters 1 through 9 of Proverbs, that really at the heart of wisdom in general, biblically, is the reflection and imitation of God, which we really see in that father-son relationship that certainly can be and is oftentimes and should be a father-son literally, but also is really also taken, I think, to be kind of literarily and metaphorically in many ways to be God and his people, or God and the faithful. And so there's this call to imitate and reflect God's very character. And that is the start and the finish of wisdom, God himself.
Okay. Just going a little bit back about, you want to go overseas. You're not really, at this point, not really sure where, I guess. And you are working on this PhD. Why do you need to do a PhD to be a missionary? Or why was it good for you? And I'm talking to someone, I'm playing devil's advocate here for a minute.
Yeah. Well, I would say you don't have to have a PhD to be a missionary. That's for sure. There's plenty of missionaries without PhDs. For me personally, like I said, I was planning to just go straight overseas after the MDiv. And like I said, there was several people that I either directly or indirectly had basically said similar things along the lines of, go as far in your studies and your preparation as the Lord allows. Of course, not everyone has the opportunity to get a PhD. That's just not a reality for everyone for various reasons. But it was kind of one of those things where I said, okay, Lord, well, if you want it to be, then, let it be. And I think that the preparation is helpful because it's really a tool, right? And the church is full of tools, right? There's people who are good singers. There's people who are good, with leadership or administration, right? All kinds of different tools and giftings and abilities. And so PhD is one of those tools, I would say, in terms of preparation and the ability to help develop leaders and just the church in general. I think to some extent too, we can take education for granted in the US because we have access to a lot of materials. We have access to a lot of just even online stuff. And especially as English speakers, there's so much in English that we have access to. And so we have just a huge opportunity that, most of the world doesn't have, even if it's just because they don't know English, So I think being able to have that time to really dig deep into the scripture, into theology, into methods, and to thinking well, I think really does serve the church ultimately in a really great way that helps it to be more firm, more strong, and hopefully will last longer as well.
Okay. And you came to California, being from the East Coast. Talk to me about that transition and how being in California helped prepare you for doing ministry in general or ministry overseas.
in
And you did a
California.
lot in California with
Yeah.
the church you helped start and just the church you were at before and all that.
Um, yeah. Well, I mean, California is a pretty diverse place in a lot of ways. It's a melting pot. So people come from all over the place. There's a lot of locals in some sense, but there's also just a ton of people from all over. And so, on one hand, in Southern California, the church culture is fairly strong, actually. But at the same time, it's a hyper secular culture and society as well. So it's kind of interesting to have both a very, very secular environment, and yet many really awesome and solid churches as well, doing good work there too. So getting to interact with lots of people, though I will say, most of the big cities around the world are melting pots as well. So even coming here, probably a third of the church here that I'm helping with is Chinese. Another third is from Latin America, and then of course the other third is from Spain or in this area. So even the church here, as in a major city, is very much a melting pot as well. So very similar in that regard.
Okay. Okay. Now you are overseas. You just arrived about a month or so ago. Is that right? About a month
Yeah.
ago? Yeah. Okay. So talk to me. What is it like, being I know you did military service, but you're just the first time in vocational ministry, if I understand correctly, you've actually lived overseas.
Yeah.
Like,
Like
talk to me about what
permanently.
you're thinking.
I did a summer project for a couple months in West Africa, but that was a temporary assignment, not a permanent one like here. So it's a little bit different mentality.
Okay. Yeah, so talk to me about what do you, reverse culture shock, has it started yet? Talk to me about the sights and the sounds and what's like going through your mind right now, just being there for about a month or so now.
um, I think, I don't speak Spanish. I've been trying to learn a little bit before I got here, but it wasn't enough to be fluent for sure. So obviously just language in general and not being able to communicate is frustrating or difficult. I'm in Madrid, which is a capital city. So it's very much a very lively European city. Um, it's very European, but also very Spanish. It has its own kind of flavor in that regard. um, it's riding buses, so public transportation is the norm. It's loud and busy. There's people on the streets all the time, everywhere. So even the culture here, they take lunch starting at earliest 1 p.m. But for them, lunch extends to about 6 p.m. And dinner for them really doesn't start till at earliest 7 p.m. and really is more like 10 p.m. if not later. So it's a different kind of schedule for time in life.
Yeah, I imagine. I remember being overseas and that just, it's like kids are out 11 o'clock at night and just playing and like, man, like, I don't know how they do it, but that's just different cultures have thrive in different ways. And that's the beauty of it. Okay. So if you were to, you got saved recently, I don't say recently, but you got saved later in life. And you're just starting your vocational ministry career, like in many ways. What's one thing you wish you would have known earlier in your walk with Christ that you know now?
Well, probably lots of things, I suppose. One thing that comes to mind, I guess, is just, um, you know, realizing that it's God's work and God's time, that what we're doing and the things we do um, is is really according to His schedule. So, like I had mentioned, I I had actually gotten interested in doing missions while I was in college ministry. And that I did that summer missions trip to West Africa in actually 2012. And right after that, I felt called to ministry and even missions. But for some interesting, strange reasons, God didn't open that door then. It was a very clear no at the time. And it essentially took about 12 more years before I actually was able to get overseas, so to speak, and do missions, which I had felt called to a long time before. So anyways, all just to say, being open to what the Lord has and trying to follow his leading and not try to make my own way, so to speak, but really try to be faithful in each and every day and everything that he calls us to, because we really don't know what he's called us to, a month from now, a year from now, 10 years from now. But we do know what he's called us to today because that's where we are. And that's the person that he's put in front of us. And so really trying to just make the most of all those opportunities and just be patient and let God ultimately be in charge of the time and the work.
Okay. There are going to be some people on this, listening to this, that are either in seminary or are thinking about going to seminary or just, seminary related. If you could give them one piece of advice as someone who's thinking about going to seminary, entering into seminary, what would it be?
Yeah. Well, seminary can be amazing because you get to learn all these wonderful things. But seminary can also be really dangerous for our faith. You can get disconnected. You can kind of get lost in the information and get disconnected from the Lord. But I would say one thing that kind of helped me was to really see everything as devotional in a sense. So even when you're reading stuff that doesn't feel very devotional, when you're reading stuff that maybe you feel like you have to read or do, really try to see how God is at work in that, how God has been faithful in that, and really think of everything devotionally, if you will, and seeing how it ultimately does lead us to a deeper faith in our own lives, but even what we can take and minister and use to minister for others, because I've heard that the purpose of learning is not to just take, but to give, right? And I think that's a really great principle. And if we approach our learning with the mindset of giving it, then not only will we be more grateful for it, but we'll be more eager to actually put it to use, which will actually help us to learn it better too.
How do I say this? You've been there. You've been in Spain for a month. You've done the board training. How can people help you in your ministry? Is there a way for people to promote your ministry, for us to help you in your ministry? What is the best way to help you do your job the best?
Well, a couple things, of course. First, and not to sound cheesy, but like seriously, prayer. Honestly, like I said, this is God's work, right? And, we can only do what God allows, what God opens the door for, through the power of the Spirit. And so, it's encouraging. And I've heard examples, even here on the field, of things that the team has been praying for and God has directly fulfilled because of prayer partners, really just being fervent in prayer back in the States, churches and friends and family and such. So be praying for Spain and Madrid. Like I said, it's a hyper secular place. Very, 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 very few people are actually believers. And the only believers that are actually here are almost entirely from somewhere else. So Latin America, like I said, maybe some Chinese, but there's very, very few actual Spaniards that are really believers here. And so, to some extent, it's really difficult. It's hard soil, and, it's really God's work. I would also say, I'm with the IMB and it's a huge blessing to be with them because of the cooperative program and Lottie Moon offerings. So please give, donate, get your churches on board, do Lottie Moon drives around Christmas time. That really does help support directly the ministry and work that happens here, but of course around the world as well. And we literally can't do it without the help of the 40 something thousand churches that partner together to make this happen. And so that is really just a huge blessing and an honor to get to serve in that way. But it's only through it's only possible through the cooperative program and Lottie Moon. So thank God for that.
Yeah, I mean it's half the board's income a year, man. So the Lottie Moon is just there's a beauty to that. So IMB missionaries, as you know, are one of the few missionary groups that don't have to raise their own support.
Yeah, it's very unique.
And talking to other missionaries who have to raise their own support. I don't think there's a beauty to that I don't know that I think make other organizations envious. So you're right. I mean, Lottie there's a beauty to Lottie Moon, and we're grateful for that as Southern Baptist. Yeah.
I actually knew quite a few people in my IMB training who had been former missionaries through various other groups and in ways, but had joined the IMB just because it was so challenging on their own, essentially. But not only the sort of support directly financially, but the support in so many different ways in life and, all kinds of ways, health, all kinds of things that the IMB takes care of. And it's really such an enormous blessing for the many missionaries who get to stay and go and wherever they are in the world for the gospel, right?
Yeah, and it's beautiful. Yeah. And it is again one of the few that are like that. Hey, let me ask you a bit of a theological question. How do you see the local church playing a role in your ministry? What relationship does the local church have to what you're doing overseas? So someone in America, Southern Baptist Church in America, members in America, what do you, just from a theological and a practical standpoint?
Well, the IMB likes to emphasize that the IMB is not a sending organization as much as they are a facilitation organization. They, in more recent years perhaps, but they really tried to emphasize that it's really churches that send missionaries, and the IMB is the one who helps make that work well, you might say. And so they kind of come alongside sending churches, but really, again, through the cooperative program in Lottie Moon, get to serve churches around the U.S. So I would say that as a field missionary here, the local church plays a huge role in support, financially, of course, through prayer and literally on prayer chats and newsletters and things like that. Also with just encouragement. So a two-way street there in communication. So reaching out and just saying, hey, praying for you. Also planning trips if possible, if it makes sense. So here it's definitely more possible and easy to plan trips. And so, hopefully finding opportunities to come here and experience the work that God is doing here. And kind of in a two-way street, getting to serve the church as well from this side, that, we get to encourage the local church to be missionally minded, to remember that the gospel is for all the world, and not just inside the four walls of a church building. And so to always have that kind of on the forefront of their minds and their hearts that, we are called to be disciples of Jesus, and he had a very clear command for us, to go into all the world, right? So it's kind of a two-way street, both kind of encouraging and supporting each other.
And one of the things that brings up another question. You mentioned that Spain is quite secular. The stereotype of Spain is that it's like Roman Catholic, right? Mm-hmm. But what I hear you saying is that it's not, or maybe it is culturally. Is that what I'm getting from you?
Oh yeah, Yeah. I've talked to lots of people here, and you're right. In terms of what they might think of as national identity is Catholic,
Mm.
right? So their national identity is Catholic. And if you actually ask a person what they believe, very few people will go beyond saying simply, sure, I believe there's a God. Now, you might find somebody who says that, but even then, very few. Most would say, you know, it's religion, it's our heritage. I don't know if I really believe it, all that Bible stuff. And realistically, most of them just don't know the Bible at all. They don't know the gospel. They don't really know what Christianity teaches, actually. And so if you drill down just a millimeter, it's really just a very thin national identity more than it is anything else. So at the core, yeah, it's very, very secular.
Okay. Um, if you could recommend a book or two for people to read, what would it be? What would they be?
Books. Gosh, lots of books out there. I don't know. I think maybe as an Old Testament person, I might say Knowing Jesus from the Old Testament by Chris Wright. It's a pretty simple book. It's a simple idea, but it's just good to be reminded of God's plan and God's foretelling of how Jesus comes about, and that it wasn't just out of the blue. And again, I studied Old Testament partly because just I didn't know much, and the reality is a lot of folks just are not super familiar with the Old Testament and how central it is to the story of Christ and the New Testament, and the great heritage there. I would also say another interesting book, which is maybe more spiritual in a sense, is The Practicing of the Presence, by a monk from long ago. And it's an interesting book, but really just kind of the idea of all of life can and should be lived sort of in the presence of the Lord, that even in our mundane tasks, that we can be in fellowship and communion with the Lord. And so it's both of those are kind of helpful. Of course, read the Bible. That goes without saying, but it also needs to be said too, because it's oftentimes hard for us to get into the Bible sometimes, and we just want to jump straight to other books, secondary, tertiary literature, and those are good. But honestly, the more I talk to people, the more I realize, folks just really don't know the Bible. And so read the Bible, please.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good word. Good word about that. Is we don't ever want to forget the reason. The most important book, right? It's the Bible. Sometimes we
It is.
want to get other books first. Is there anything else that you have been interested in talking about and sharing that someone what would be something that someone wouldn't necessarily expect if they were thinking about going overseas?
I mean, I would say, in general too, I think it's important to remember that, ministry is God oriented and others oriented. And sometimes it's easy to get caught up in being task oriented. And I'm naturally a task oriented person. And so sometimes it's easy to think that, or just to forget the essential nature of really building and caring about people, in a real meaningful way, and really seeing them through God's eyes. I think a lot of church hurt and a lot of burnout and a lot of issues that happen in church, which very easily happen overseas, come through just not really loving one another like Christ commanded us to do. They say that the number one reason people leave the field, even through the IMB, is for interpersonal conflicts, with team members. And so again, there's spiritual warfare, there's challenges, there's too much to do. Sometimes it's overwhelming. And that's just prime time for the enemy to attack us and to get us to, bite and claw at one another instead of loving them like Christ has loved us, and being humble and considering the other more highly than ourselves. So So that's just a reality. We come here to do a task, as they say in the IMB, the missionary task. But the missionary task is ultimately people and relationships. And so keeping that central and at the heart of what we do is I think really key.
Yeah, I mean, there's a PhD dissertation that was done a little while ago about why people leave overseas ministry, and the number one reason was team issues. So
Yeah.
that's a wise word. So that's something we can keep in prayer for you as you are adjusting to a new environment with new people and different culture and all that. So that's good to keep in mind. Jesse, hey, I appreciate you taking your time. You're in the middle of some people that are with you, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I appreciate you taking the time now, and may try to catch up with you maybe another 6 months or 6 to 8 months or so. See how things are going. See how things see how things are working with you. But I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you.